it seems that every day almost, at least every week, there's a headline in the newspaper which is all about how our lifestyle choices are impacting on our health. And people like to read this. People genuinely like to understand how to improve their health, and they want to know what things they could be doing differently in order to improve their health. But it seems like, you know, all the time we're eating too much of the wrong stuff, or we're drinking too much, or maybe we're not drinking enough, or we're sleeping too much or too long or too little. There are all these headlines about our lifestyle choices impacting our chances of getting diseases. And they usually come accompanied with a statistic which they use to back up their claims. And so I found a statistic in a newspaper, and it shocked me, and I want to tell you about that story. So in 2009, the World Cancer Research Fund published a report which was an amalgam of hundreds of different studies onto the impact of our lifestyle choices, the impact our lifestyle choices were having on our chances of getting various different types of cancer. So it was over 100 different studies, and they'd summarised the results in a 500-page report. And the Sun newspaper read this report, or someone at the Sun read this report, or at least they read some of it, and they decided to pick just one of these hundreds of reports to highlight. And they looked at a report which was investigating the risk of getting colorectal cancer for people who eat 50 grams of processed meat a day. So this was the original study. And the Sun chose to convey the results of this study using the admittedly inspired headline, "Careless Pork Costs Lives." So in this article that I read, they claimed for people that eat a bacon sandwich every day, the increase in risk of getting colorectal cancer was as high as 20%. And this alarmed me because I didn't really understand what it meant. I thought, could it possibly be true that if people who don't eat a bacon sandwich every day, maybe their background rate of getting colorectal cancer is 5%, does it mean then that of people who eat a bacon sandwich every day, that their risk of getting colorectal cancer is as high as 25%? And this sort of alarmed me that a quarter of all people who eat bacon sandwiches could be getting colorectal cancer. And I guess this was the idea that it was just, you know, the idea that they were trying to portray was that this was a big figure, and it was shocking and surprising. And so before I could investigate this, the Sun then launched a Save Our Bacon campaign, in which they branded scientists as health Nazis who declared a war on bacon, despite the fact that, as I mentioned, the original article was nothing to do with bacon. It was all about processed meat, of which bacon is one type. But this is the way the Sun decided to play this, and they sold loads and loads of newspapers on the back of this Save Our Bacon campaign, because they knew that pitching it in terms of bacon would strike at the heart of the British psyche. People really like their bacon sandwiches. So I wanted to investigate this and figure out where this statistic came from. So it turned out that what the Sun had calculated is a figure called a relative risk. So they'd looked at this study, and they'd found that of people that don't eat a bacon sandwich, 5 people might expect to get colorectal cancer over the course of their lifetime. And then they'd compared this to people who do eat bacon sandwiches, and they'd found that 6 people might expect to get colorectal cancer over the course of their lifetime. And then they'd calculated this thing called the relative risk. So this is usually used for the increased risk of or the increased or decreased risk of a treatment, or a side effect of a treatment. So in this case, the treatment is eating a bacon sandwich. So they calculated the risk of getting colorectal cancer with eating a bacon sandwich every day, and they divided that by the risk without eating a bacon sandwich every day. So they'd found 6, and they divided that by 5, and they'd appreciated that 6 is actually an increase of 20% on 5. It's completely true. It's this figure 1.2, and 1.2 is an increase of 20% on 1, the baseline risk. So in fact, their figure was not incorrect. They hadn't made a mistake in the mathematics, but they'd just been slightly disingenuous in the way that they'd presented this. Okay, so they'd found a 20% increase in relative risk. But if you see a newspaper article and it just has a single figure, and it's usually a big figure and it's a percentage, then you should be really careful about how much you believe that article. Because what we really need to know to interpret how dangerous it is to eat a bacon sandwich is not the relative risk. We need to know something called the absolute risk. Okay, so the absolute risk says that of 100 people that eat a bacon sandwich, on average, 5 of them, who don't eat a bacon sandwich, on average, 5 of them will get colorectal cancer over the course of their lifetime. And then when you compare that to people who do eat a bacon sandwich, it increases massively to 6 people out of 100. So it's really not a huge risk increase. It's a 1% absolute risk increase. But because the background rate of 5% is so low, even a small increase of just 1 person per 100 can make the relative risk seem really large. So if you see just a single figure, usually a percentage, then you should start to question whether you believe that article. At least you should dig deeper, perhaps, to find out what the true statistics are. So this is a concept called mismatched framing, and I'd like to pretend that it only occurs in newspapers in order to sell newspapers, but actually it occurs all over the place. It occurs in scientific journals and also occurs in patient advice literature. So this